I am not kidding. We're not recording yet. I mean, we're not doing the show yet. I am not kidding when I tell you, you have given me so much joy. I have not read all 7 of the books, but I think I've read 5, and
Oh my God, Jason Alexander, because I have seen every Seinfeld episode at least 4 times.
Well,
I'm like doing everything I can to not blurt out, and you want to be my latex
salesman. Of course, I'm totally with you. Blurt it out anytime. You're just,
and I know you do a million other things besides that, but I just have so much joy.
Really? No, really? Really? No, really? Really?
This woman, I'm going to start with her name, Mary Roach. Many of you will know who she is. She has written 7 New York Times bestsellers. They're almost always one name books. Like we have Stiff, we have Spook, we have Bonk, Packing with Mars. She went all out on that. Then we have Gulp, we have Grunt, and we have Fuzz. And they are a cross between science and comedy, and they are hysterical books. I think most people would know her for, if you go online, she did a TED Talk in 2009 called 10 Things You Didn't Know About Orgasm, which is probably one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. And it was focused on a book that is the sort of centerpiece of our Really for the day. In doing the book Bonk, which was about sex research and the science of sex research and arousal, Ms. Roach had relations with her husband in some sort of clinical, almost like an MRI kind of thing, with an ultrasound and a thing. And you know, that's called getting your hands dirty. That's the dictionary definition.
Well, you're like an author.
Hands dirty.
You're like an author who's going to jump in on the thing, whatever
Right.
the thing is.
And I want to know how she did it, why she did it, how she got her husband to do it.
My wife coming to me and saying, first of all, my wife coming to me saying I want to have sex already.
Already.
Right.
Now you write a book.
I got to get over I go through the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages. It's like, what? All right, now I'm angry now, and accept it. If she came to me and said, I want to have sex, and I have to do it in front of a researcher.
Yes.
Who's going to
have instruments on you.
Who's going to
the minute I hear sex and measuring, I'm out. So
so there's so much to this.
And so let's just jump in with author extraordinaire Mary Roach. Welcome to Really No Really.
Oh, thank you so much.
So
I'm
excited
to be here.
So how did you, when you did the book Bonk, okay?
Yeah.
Give us a history. Again, you jump into subject. I love how you determine what's more than an article, how this is a book rather than an article. But aside from that, you jump in and give us a little bit of history and sex research, because that in itself is a fascinating field, because a lot of sex researchers are looked down upon, because it's like the low,
sort of the dark corner.
You're in the gutter of science. It's like it's dirty somehow, even though everybody wants to figure it out. So give us a little history on that, and then what got you to the point of, hey, hubby,
I'm gonna spend some time in this, and I'm gonna drag Ed with me.
Yeah, this is what happened. I was looking at, and this is very uncharacteristic of me, I was looking through an issue of Film Quarterly, which makes me seem really erudite and cinematic and scholarly. And anyway, I don't know why. It wasn't my own copy, but there was a reference to the colposcopic films of Masters and Johnson. And I was like, wait a minute, colposcopy, that's when they're taking like a biopsy of the cervix. They're in there doing stuff. So I'm like, this means Masters and Johnson, the sex researchers that we've all heard of, were literally filming a woman while she responds sexually. It sounded like that. So based on that sentence, pretty much just that sentence in Film Quarterly, I went to my editor and I'm like, sex research, next book, right? Because this is science, the physiology of intercourse and arousal, and fertility too is part of it. But I'm like, that is bringing people into a laboratory setting and having them do sexual things while you're like the researcher in the white coat with the clipboard. That's just so awkward and surreal. And I'm like, that there has to be a whole world of really incredible material for me to play around with. And she's like, go, do it. And in fact, there was. And but the thing with my books, I always like to put myself into the story a little bit. And in this case, I thought, well, that's a little weird, so I'll try to find researchers who are doing work in a lab with subjects, and I'll just be there, with a notepad. And so I would contact these researchers, and they'd be like, I'm sorry, you want to be in the room with a notebook while somebody else is, let's say, I don't know, masturbating while hooked up to some electro hoo-ha device. And they're like, no, that's not going to work. But every now and then they'd go, but you can be the subject. How would you like to do that? And in particular, well, the short answer is like, I would not want to do that because it's incredibly awkward. But I realized I was probably going to have to do that because I wasn't getting access any other way. So I found this guy, Dr. Deng, who was a imaging expert in London, and I came across a paper he had done about erections and Peyronie's, and he had done a 3D movie of an erecting penis, his own, by the way. And he said, and this is all in email, he's like, yeah, for my next experiment, I would like to film with ultrasound, 3-dimensional sexual congress. And I'm like, great, I'd like to be there for that. And he's like, well, here's the thing. We're having a little trouble finding volunteers. So if your organization can supply a willing couple for study, I'd be happy to arrange it. So my organization called its husband. And I'm like, honey, you know how you said you haven't been to London in a long time? Well, we should go, and I'll expense us a really nice room. We'll go to see a play. Jeremy Irons is on something in the West End. It'll be great. We also have to have sex in front of a researcher. And my husband is he's such a, first of all, he's a mensch. He's a great guy. And he had also said up front when he heard what the book was about, he's like, sex research, sign me up.
Wow.
So I'm like, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but he didn't know to what extent he was signed up.
He didn't know what list he was on.
Exactly.
Wow.
So we went and did that. And people think it was an MRI tube, which fine. I'd have sex in an MRI tube, but because you have privacy, right? You're in a little tube. It's uncomfortable. You're cramped in there. I don't even know if you could fit 2 people. Well, you can because somebody else did it.
Somebody did it, right?
Yeah, somebody else did it. Those little acrobats people from the Netherlands did
Another Cirque du Soleil act. Like, okay.
Yeah. Right. Jupe. His name was Jupe. Jupe and his wife or girlfriend or whatever.
Wow.
Anyway, but you have some privacy. But with ultrasound, it's the wand, and I don't need to go too much into the logistics here, but the guy has the wand on my belly, which means Ed is behind me, but the guy's right there. You're like arm's length. And it was awkward.
Yikes!
Yeah.
And Viagra, you say you needed Viagra was used in a magazine. A magazine was used because your husband wasn't facing you or something. What? I can't picture the whole setup.
He goes, "Don't worry." He goes, "Yeah, well, we have Viagra," and he said, "And I have some stimulative literature." I think it was was it a copy of GQ or something? I mean, it was it wasn't porn. It was, I think, how they have a pretty woman telling a joke or something, or the Esquire, it's like, that's what he...
Can I tell you, you probably know this, but both of my children are in vitro. So I had to go make deliveries. And the quality of the stimulating material, and they should be top notch. They are always very scratchy porn films from the 1970s or something.
You got a movie at least.
I had a video. Yeah, I had a video. Yeah. I had a little video, but I didn't have a partner. So, we needed to compensate. So, wow, extraordinary. So, I want to talk a little bit about all your books and how you get there. But can you talk a little bit about, because for people that may not be familiar with your work, GULP is really about what our bodies do with food from beginning to end, and where the waste goes, and how it's the whole chain of the journey.
It's the tube.
How do you decide? It's exactly what you said. You saw, you read this one little factoid, and you went, I think I want to pursue this. The subjects of your work, as I say, are always the crossover of something scientific and and your extraordinary sense of humor comes into play. But how do you go? This is it. I found it. I found the next one. I'm going to Oz. Is there something repetitive that happens that flips the switch for you?
I wish it were always as simple as the colposcopic films of Masters and Johnson, which was like the 30-second, I have my next book.
Yeah.
But more often, it's sometimes it's something I stumble onto in one book. Like in Stiff, I came across some studies that the early days of trying to figure out what do all these bits and pieces of the human body do? Like, what is this thing? Before people knew it's a liver, they're like, maybe this is the seat of the soul.
Right.
This is a really handsome organ. Perhaps the soul is here. So people using science to figure out the spirit or the soul, I'm like, that's kind of a weird application of science. So for me, it's science plus weird, or surreal. So I know when I see it. And GULP, people think GULP is a book about, it's about nutrition or digestion. I'm like, no. Would I do that to my readers? No, this is the weird tube that starts in your nose and mouth, runs all the way through you, full of bacteria. It's like the donut hole. I mean, you're the donut, and then there's this weird other world. This tube, literally, from your mouth to your anus, and it's a whole different set of rules in there. It's really weird. So I'm not, I do possibly here and there touch on things like digestion and nutrition, but that it would be to do the book a disservice. There's a chapter about, what got me going on it was the Jonah story, and I'm like, is it possible for anybody to survive in anyone else's stomach? And we went I went down this rabbit hole of, actually, it doesn't matter. Occasionally bugs, but and then like chewing. There's a whole lab in the Netherlands where they study the way that when you chew, you break something down, and then you form it into a bolus, so it's swallowable. It has to be in the swallowable state, and they do video X-rays of people chewing and forming boluses, and just the whole. I don't any with science. So often there's some thing that you've taken for granted that all of a sudden you're like, wow, bolus formation is really interesting and gross. Let's get Mary Roach on the line.
So to that point, with doing the research, you had sex, and you were monitored and filmed. Was it filmed also?
Yes, it was filmed it was 4D, which means 3D plus time, I think is the way yes, it was an ultrasound movie.
So you did all of that in the service of figuring out, can science break down arousal? Can we figure out what arousal is, correct? Arousal and attraction, yes? So
that wasn't the point. He's an imaging guy, so he's like, when he was filming his own erecting penis, it was because this technology might be able to help somebody who has Peyronie's. So, if surgeons before operating could see, let's see what we're dealing with this particular person's crooked penis, and where would we operate, and how is it erecting? Because erection is a dynamic thing. In so many ways.
So was he much more concerned with Ed than he was with you in that particular?
Well, the Peyronie's thing was the first thing he did, and then the genitals and sexual congress was more. I think that application. Honestly, I don't know. I looked him up recently to see if the story ever, the journal paper ever appeared. And it didn't. And part of that was that the 3D didn't come out that well. You could actually, the film was online.
I love that you take this on and you're not a scientist either, which is lovely. That it's out of curiosity and you go deep. You go down rabbit holes. It's the thing that leads to the thing that leads to the thing that leads to the thing. And you always find the next thing where you go, wait a minute. You know what that looks like? And I got to then explore that. So,
but I also love that where your curiosity goes to in science is to the stuff that I guess in some ways might be considered the taboo-y stuff, where people do want to know, how does an astronaut poop? And you go and, most of us we had an astronaut on our show. That was the last question we would ever ask him, but you go right to it.
I have no shame.
Yeah.
I got no shame. I'm not. I completely own the fact that my mind is, let's say, in the gutter sometimes. And the other thing with the taboo, with taboo topics and books, early on in my career, I'd written a lot of magazine stuff, but I hadn't done a book, and I was thinking, like, what is it that hasn't been written about already?
Yeah.
And the taboo things are things that other people might go, I would never write a book about cadavers because people would think there's something wrong with me. Whereas I'm like, give it to me, I'll do it.
But
I'll do
could
it.
I get back to the astronaut thing? You did zero gravity, right?
I did, yeah, I did.
And did you? So I think you wrote that the way they had to test the toilet stuff, because they have to, because they're sending people up, is they had to have a guy try and do it in zero gravity. I mean, it had to.
Isn't that amazing? Oh God, it's so interesting because it's you take a toilet. Okay, this is a system that relies on gravity and water flow, water flowing down and flush. There's that keyword, flushing the caca away, and so now when you're talking about putting a waste management system in space, you need to completely rethink the system. And so in the first 2 space programs, in actually 3, in Mercury they didn't need it. Gemini and Apollo, there was no toilet. There was the fecal bag. Because there was no, they hadn't redesigned the system. They didn't have enough space.
Right.
So you were like crapping in a plastic bag with a little finger cut to coach the material because you don't have good separation. The gravity's not pulling the poop away from your body. So you had to like coax it along, and they hated it. The morale was like, like off the charts negative. Like this is like, it smelled like a latrine in there after 2 weeks, and they're like, something has to change. And then it was like at one point NASA was like, yes, we have to do better. And they did. So finally, we have to do better. And then, so for the space shuttle and for the ISS, now there are toilets. But the waste management engineering people, God, those are heroes. They figured it out. It's an airflow system. You're like entraining the, here's my favorite euphemism from NASA, the material.
Yeah, right.
you're entraining the material. Or wait, contributions. That's a good one too.
Oh, that's
I made a contribution earlier today.
I just
That's
made a
wonderful. I'm
contribution.
using that
Yeah,
from that's from now
don't
on.
go in there. I made a
That's my word.
contribution.
That's my word from now on.
So they had to. Yes, so they had to completely rethink it. And now, all right, you're not going to put this multi-million-dollar device up into zero gravity without testing it first. So they had to put it on the what used to be called the Vomit Comet, that plane that goes up and down like a roller coaster, and you have 20 seconds of weightlessness in which to test your new fancy NASA toilet.
Yeah.
And that means some poor guy from the waste management department has 20 seconds to do it.
And has to make a donation on cue.
He has to make a contribution on cue. So, and I talked to a guy, alas, was not on such a flight, but I talked to an engineer from the waste management world who had been on there, and he's like, yeah, okay, so they had, picture it, they got a curtain around him, all right, but we can see, the bottom of the toilet and the feet, okay, and we start to go, over the part where you're weightless,
the
and everybody's like, go, 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 go.
Jeez. The pressure is, oh my God.
The pressure,
oh
I
my
know.
God.
And he failed. He couldn't do it. Who could? It's like it's like you could time set your watch by most people's sphincters. You're like there's a certain time of day you can go, and that's it. And so they're like, what do we do? And then they hired, or they gave the assignment to someone at NASA Ames to come up with a high-fidelity human fecal simulant. And I have seen the paper, and there are recipes and photographs, and it was a series. And the guy would not reply to my emails, so I alas didn't get to interview this man. But he really took it to heart. Like there's the exact amount of E. coli even in here, the rheology, the viscousness, everything is the same, and so that enabled them to test this toilet and subsequent toilets. And for me, this is not so much about poop as it is about just the surreal wonderfulnness of engineering.
The challenge. I mean, think about that challenge. How important. That's a make or break. Like signing up to the astronaut corps. I'm going to the pager. I got to do this. I got to. Oh, wait a minute. I got to do what? I got to poop.
My favorite moment on that one would have been the guy outside the curtain 20 seconds later going, Houston, we have a problem.
Well, the other part of that is dandruff. All of this stuff is floating around if you're not careful.
Yes.
And you squeeze the
Yeah.
food. I mean, so imagine that if they didn't have that done.
I understand.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, with the space, the shuttle toilet, it had a little cap a little door that would close when you were done. Okay, because the stuff, the contribution is briefly hovering, it's floating, right? Okay, so and if you shut the door at the wrong time, you would have what was called fecal decapitation, and this is an actual term. I didn't make it up. This is a NASA term.
I love NASA so much.
So, but that little the little head of
Yeah.
the
Gonna be then part of your
contribution is now going to float around
Yes, it
the
is.
space shuttle,
Till
and it's up to
re-entry.
you to,
Yep.
to chase it down.
What I thought would be fun, and a great way to introduce your work to people who may not be familiar with all of it, is I thought I'd name one book at a time, and maybe
Yeah.
you could share like the most fascinating thing that you thought came out of that book for you, like the fun fact that you went, ooh,
Oh my
that's
God,
really
this
exciting.
is so hard. This is so hard. There's
Nobody
so
said it was
many-
going to be easy. Nobody
No, there's
promised
no
you
quiz.
easy,
No one will
Mary.
know if you're wrong.
Come on.
Nobody's going to know.
Mix
Make
stuff up.
something up.
Yeah, yeah, you go.
We don't know. We have no idea. So I think the first one was Stiff, right? Which was the subtitle, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers, which was
Yes.
really an exploration of what we do with dead bodies from the moment of departure till they're done
Yeah.
being used, either
Right.
interred or used for science.
Right.
What was the most fascinating, or one of the most fascinating revelations that came out of that book for you?
Oh God, that one. People are familiar most with people. Donate your body to science. It's often you're being used to teach anatomy or to learn some surgical technique, or there's some pretty common things. But then there's stuff like there was a dude in Paris around the turn of the last century, Pierre Barbet, who was investigating the Shroud of Turin. He had this idea that the blood marks where the nails were, like that he could verify the truth of the shroud by erecting a cross and taking cadaver, sometimes arms with a weight, sometimes whole bodies, and like putting them on the cross. And I was like, that's a pretty unique and horrifying use of
Of a cadaver.
donating cadavers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whose
Yeah.
cadaver it was, but anyway, that one kind of
Yikes.
took the cake as most bizarre cadaver
And
research.
did
I
he
would say.
actually conclude anything from it, other than it's a bad
I
idea?
think that his conclusion was already in place before he started
I see.
the project. Yeah.
All right, so the book
yeah.
after that was Spook, which I have to say, of all of them, I was really intrigued with this book. Spook is the science that tackles the afterlife. As you were saying,
Yeah.
you bumped into some research during Stiff that made you think about Spook. So, I mean, the thing that I remember was the chapter you wrote about where they were trying to weigh the soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was kind
Yeah,
of fascinating.
That was so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Spook is a book about people trying to use scientific method to prove or disprove the existence of a spirit or a soul. And I just love the fact that somebody's like, well, you can have faith and you could do it that way, but I'm going to prove it, and I
Yeah.
have science.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the soul weigher, that was just this. Duncan McDougall was this. He was a physician around the time of a big tuberculosis outbreak. I think we're talking the teens, 19 or early 20s. So he worked in a tuberculosis sanitarium, and so he sadly had a steady supply of people dying.
Yeah.
And he was fascinated with consciousness theory, you might say, the sort of supernatural type of things. And he's like, what if we took, he had access to a scale. It was an industrial scale used for weighing silk, I think, was what I remember reading. So he's like, what if we took a person who's moribund, who isn't going to be around long, we put them on, and he installed a bed on the scale, kind of a bed scale, and he sat there sort of waiting for the person to pass and watching the scale, the needle on the scale. At the moment of death, would the person lose a little weight as the soul departed
Yeah.
the body, which is kind of hilarious because 21 grams. That's where that movie
Right,
idea
exactly.
21
Yeah.
grams
Right.
is from that. I mean, that's pretty heavy for a soul, right?
Yeah.
And what I also loved is that I found a modern day soul wearer, a couple of them, but one of them was this guy who he was a sheep farmer, and he got interested in Duncan McDougall and the whole notion of can you weigh consciousness, and so he's like, well, I have to. I butcher sheep anyway, so why don't I do it on a scale? And the scales had become by that point more sophisticated. So he's like, maybe I can get some data that's a little bit better than the, circa 1920 material from Duncan McDougall. So he puts this sheep on a scale as it's. I don't know how he killed it, but anyway, the scale went up slightly.
He's been inhabited by the devil.
This is like, so what? This is like when humans die, their souls go into sheep or something. I don't know. Somehow sheep was gaining.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, the next one was, of course, Bonk is the book that we started with. There are so many fascinating things in this book.
Oh yeah.
But what's the one that
Oh my
jumped
God.
out
What
at
about
you?
Okay, here's my favorite. I think this is my favorite. This is something when I was working on this book, I would go into the UCSF med school library, and they had a whole wall of the Journal of Sex Research, and I would just go through, and maybe I'd be like, table of contents, boring. Oh, sexual intercourse as a potential cure for intractable hiccups, and I'd be like running to the copy machine, like this is something, and it was a published paper that apparently. Orgasm, more specifically, although he sexual intercourse was what he used in the title, but he did have a note saying having some advice for unattached hiccupers. Like if you weren't married, you
You have to masturbate the hiccups. Masturbate the hiccups away. Oh my gosh.
But I like that there's a demographic, unattached hiccupers.
I
You know
was
what
fascinated by but there were two things in that book that got me. Also, one was, and I think you talk about her in the TED Talk, the woman who would brush her teeth to orgasm,
Yeah.
and in
Yeah,
seemingly
this-
very
this-
little time,
yes.
is what you describe.
Yes. The orgasm is it's a reflex, and it is triggered in some quite atypical, let's say, ways. One of them being this woman who, when she brushed her teeth, would have an orgasm, and you'd think she'd have like amazing oral hygiene, and she'd be like really excited, like I have very clean teeth, and I'm really happy all the time. But she didn't like it at all. And there was another. There's some people who have spontaneous orgasms, and that you could imagine, depending on the situation where it happens.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know, the child's first communion or something. I mean, it can be kind of awkward depending on where it happens. So people want to be in control of
Sure.
somewhat of where and when they have an orgasm. So some of them, and I would get, after the TED Talk, I started getting emails from people who thought that I'm a researcher, and there was a woman who said, for me, on a good day, even putting on lip gloss will do it. And I was like, wow.
Wow.
There's a guy from Greece who wrote to me and said, I have an orgasm while riding a bicycle, and it happens. I know that it's going to happen, but I don't know quite when. So sometimes when I'm riding to an appointment, I ride around in circles waiting for it to happen, and I'm sometimes late for my appointment. Like he's
Got to get it out of the way.
It's making me
Let me
late.
get it out of the way. Didn't the woman, though, in your TED Talk, didn't the one who could have spontaneous orgasm, when you said, God, so when you get home, do you have an orgasm? And what did she tell you? Did she say,
Yeah, there was a woman who had learned, well, this wasn't a spontaneous one. This was Kim Ayers, who had, she was a sex positive person in the Bay Area here, and she had taught herself to mentally bring it on through, I don't know, meditative or whatever. And I said, we were having dinner at a sushi restaurant. I said, can you do it right now? And she goes, I'd like to wait till we're outside, if you don't mind. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So we go outside. We're sitting on a bench on Lakeshore Avenue here in Oakland. And she's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it. And she sat there. She didn't, there was no moaning or anything. But at a certain point, she like flushed pink. Like she's like, okay, yeah, I did it. She did it. But anyway, I said, God, do you just do this all the time? And she goes, no, usually when I get home from work, I'm too tired.
Not tonight. I have a headache. Even when you can do that, it's brilliant.
I don't even want to think about it.
You know something? What this is doing for me is when I donate my body parts, I'm putting asterisks next to everything.
Yeah, right.
Like
yeah.
yes, good. Check not this, not
do not
that.
take, do not stimulate. I'm sure this one had many. Packing for Mars. What was the blowaway?
Oh, Packing for Mars. I really enjoyed my time with the two retired cosmonauts because when you try to ask an active astronaut in NASA, okay, up on the shuttle you got co-ed crews. Come on, somebody in the airlock has to have had sex, right?
Right.
They are never gonna say, as a matter of fact, on my flight we were bonking in the airlock. No, they're not gonna say it because they'll never fly again. I mean, it's a taxpayer-funded organization. They're very cautious. Yeah. But the cosmonauts, on the other hand, they were. First of all, I met them in the Museum of Cosmonautics, where they are now the directors of it, and it was 10 in the morning, and I brought this up, and well, first I'd said, I wanted one of them to sing a song he'd written. He goes, I would need to have whiskey, and the other one goes, I have it. So we go into the office and we're drinking whiskey at 10 in the morning. So I thought this might be a good time to bring up SpaceX. SpaceX. So yeah, one of them, Sasha was his nickname. He's like, yeah, people are always saying to me, Sasha, what about sex in space? Do you have sex in space? And he's like, of course, by hand. It's like, yeah, okay. So, and there was some sort of, there were rumors about a particular couple. I never was able to pin them down on that, but they did say that there was discussion at Roscosmos, which is the Russian space agency, some discussion about whether to send up a doll, like a sex doll.
Oh my God!
And
wow.
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine?
They would do it as an experiment, how sex dolls perform in space. I just make it another part of the program. Do you have one last one? The one with animals, it's fascinating to me, too, where animals are the victims, where you looked at
FUZZ.
It's FUZZ. In a different way. What's the one that you remember the most from that?
To me, the most fun chapter, I did 3 chapters set in India, and that was fun, partly because in India there's the animals, a bunch of the animals that are pests there, pests in quotes, elephants, monkeys, and there's one I'm forgetting. But anyway, they are revered. The elephant is Ganesh, the monkey is Hanuman. So there's this situation where people are both loving them and feeding them, but also like, make this stop. You have to make this stop. So the poor guy, I spent some time with this bureaucrat who was charged with trying to deal with the monkey, because the monkeys, they're stealing things. They're outside the temples where people are feeding them, but then they're constantly stealing things, picking pockets, turning your pockets inside out. They're, coming into your house and like picking up an induction cooker and throwing it on the ground. They're really, people get really pissed at them. So he's like, he kept telling me, you need to call this man, Dr. Singh, at the Wildlife Bureau. It is his problem. It is his situation. These are wild animals. It's not my problem. So then I get hold of Dr. Singh, and he's like, these animals are no longer wild. They are not my problem. So it's just this wonderful Indian bureaucracy moment that I
back and forth. The other thing that fascinated me was roadkill, which you never think about this. I'm from Pennsylvania. You see deer in the road all the time. That they haven't evolved for speed. That they can get out of the way. They know what to fear, but with cars they can't figure it out. So the solution was
basically a deer or a bird or whatever. They see a car as a predator approaching, which makes sense. this thing coming right at them, but they haven't evolved an ability to deal with the fact that this predator is going 65 miles an hour, and they're like, okay, it's coming at me. I should have time to get out of the way. Wham! And then it's like, that's it. So, there's, and people are not great at that either, sort of like figuring out the timing of crossing the street, but animals are really bad at it. And so they were trying to figure out a way, and the fact a lot of this happens at night. So if you as a deer are only seeing headlights, you're like, it's got like two little round things, or maybe getting a little bit bigger. Bam! Because you can't.
I got time.
You don't even. It doesn't even look like a car, so you don't see it looming. Is the technical term getting bigger? Right. You're like, oh, it's getting closer. So they just see two pinpoints of light, and then it's too late. So researchers were coming up with a way to kind of have a bar on the front of the car that would light up the front, so that it would be a hint that in fact this is a car.
Yeah, we don't have time for you to evolve, so figure this the hell out. So you get out. I love that, but I love that I never thought of that they're standing there going, hey, I got to get out of the way, but I got time. Let me see what I got. A minute. Because you just think they're snuck up on. No, they just haven't evolved to get out of the way. It's brilliant.
I have just two more questions. I have a practical question about reading your books. I never know, because you have so many fun footnotes. I never know when a footnote indication comes up whether I should stop where I am and jump to the footnote or finish the paragraph and then do the footnote. When you do footnotes, what's your intention there? Should I stop and read it immediately, or should I finish what I was reading and go to it afterward?
My intention all along has been to create this tension in Jason Alexander. This became an issue with the audiobook because it was stiff.
Right.
And maybe others, they're like, we skipped the footnotes because you can't interrupt the flow of the paragraph. And I'm like, you what?
Right.
You skipped the footnotes. I don't know. I guess they didn't read them and know that these are the best parts of the book. But it is an interruption. It does derail you. I know. And so when I did the audiobook for FUZZ, the last book, which is the first time I've done the narration, I'm like, we have to have the footnotes. And the audio producer's like, it doesn't work. What are you going to go, ding, footnote, and like interrupt the flow? And I was like, no, okay, we're going to just read them all at the end. So we spent another morning just doing footnote for page 22, and I would just read them.
Wow.
So.
All right.
I tend to drop down immediately, as indicated, trying to hold the thrust of the paragraph. Because you can always come back and reread it. Exactly. And then I want to know, as does everybody else, do you know what you're doing next? You don't have to spill the beans. But
I have. I'd say 2/3 of the way through a book that is. I don't usually talk about what it's about but I'll in general terms. I'll give you. You know what I'll do? I'll give you the working title, and you can guess.
All
okay,
right.
It's called "Replaceable You."
Ooh.
Has it to do with genetics?
Ooh.
There is some of that. There's,
I think it has to do with
bioengineering.
do we want to be, androids, part us, part machine, part
Or maybe it's when you die. Is it part that you die, what you save, download into computer AI? Could that be it?
You'll see.
I think I have topics I want you to do. I'm going to suggest.
I've got a pen. I'm going to write them down.
The science of ancient or tribal customs, rituals, or medicines. Occult figures like zombies, exorcisms, practices that are considered dark magic.
I wanted to. I found an exorcist. I tried to for Spook. Yeah, that's a great one.
That's a good one, right? And then people who have dealt with extreme human oddities and conditions and how they've. I don't really want you to do a freak book because I know that's not science, but there's something about the way you come at that, or I also thought the sort of science of criminal forensics and how they blend science and intuition and the emotionality.
We got to go. Are you giving her assignments?
I'm giving. Because you don't understand. Every time she puts out a book,
I got with forward by Jason Alexander. I'm not an idiot. I'm not an idiot. I get it.
So since I'm having such a good time, I'm giving her a wish list. Because I'm the first reader every time.
So can I say, because we're going to talk about this after. It fascinates me in the sexual area? Fetishes. How does something stick? When does something stick to somebody and not another person? The same thing happened Why are they a foot fetish or this or
You
that?
saw a foot. I saw a foot. For you, it's a thing.
know.
For me, it's nothing.
When did that happen? How did that happen? Why did that happen?
That should have been a chapter in Bonk, probably.
An addendum.
Yeah.
I see an addendum
I
coming.
I guess I didn't find anyone kind of trying to unpack that in terms of how it develops or whatever.
Do people who knew you as a child go, I never saw this coming? Or did they go, oh, sure, I knew she'd get into something like this?
I don't think they saw it coming. I was so boring. I was the dullest kid. Although, people sometimes say, was there any indication that this was going to happen to you? And then I thought about it, and I remembered that as a kid, I remember I was given a Barbie doll, and I was like, I don't like dolls. But I had this doll, and I'd be like, I'm gonna pull the head off and give and say I have 30 seconds to get the head back on, or she dies.
I love it.
That's actually, if you had a head and you could reattach it, you kind of have that.
Sure.
There was some science there. Like if you could put the head back on and reconnect things, there's a little blood circulating through the brain.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
See, you're not just an author. You have to be a participatory author. You like to be in this. No, a lot of authors do it from 30,000 feet above. You like to be in it and feel it. There's something different about feeling it, doing it, being part of it, rather than just doing it from a perch, above.
Exactly.
So congratulations. He turned me on to you big time. I
have to say, you have shown enormous restraint, because I know the only thing you wanted to talk about today, and you've really held back.
Elvis's death?
The defecation-induced sudden death. Yes, I know that you.
Well, because
that was the thing. That was what I said to you. Well, she also wrote about defecation-induced sudden. And you went, she's in.
Only because Elvis's death. The biggest hit Elvis had was not blue suede shoes. It was the bathroom floor. But he was on Tuinol, Seconal, drugs I never heard before.
Yes,
and I know he was bound up for a long. I mean, not to be. It was sad. It's really sad watching this guy.
Well, not only that. Yeah, I know the drugs certainly didn't help, but he had Hirschsprung's, which is didn't have the nerves connecting down to the end of his colon, so he didn't have that wonderful peristaltic wave that was pushing stuff along, so it would just back up. I mean, it was awful. The poor guy, he's having to take laxatives before he'd go on, time the show with when the laxatives were going to.
That's why he had all the hip movement. By the way, he was just trying to.
But just so you know, we've been best friends for 30 plus years. We've traveled together, toured together, done live shows together. At 4:30, about
why really
the night of a show,
really.
I go, well, have you gone yet? It's time. Just so he's clear, because he almost had to take a dump on a Broadway stage.
Classy.
Doing a show.
Yeah.
On a non-working toilet. Yeah. So we want to make sure that never happens again.
If you see me in a live performance, you can be sure I'm on empty. I'm riding on fumes, because
4:30,
terrible things have happened.
I will call him if he's in Australia. I look at Australia time and go, Jay, it's 4:30. It's time, because I know what could happen. Well, thank you.
Mary Roach,
pleasure.
now that I have chatted with you, I love you even more. I am telling you, I gush. Your work makes me so happy. I am fascinated by the things you write about, and your sense of humor just speaks to me. I sit there giggling and going, I love this woman. I am so thrilled that you came and spent some time with us.
You just gave away the name of her next book after the next one. Gush.
Gosh, yeah.
Gosh. So there you go.
That's right.
Mary, thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So
Can't
much.
wait to see the next book. And you're joyous. If people are just listening instead of seeing, you have a good time doing your books too. You can tell how much of a joy it is. You're doing the research and finding the so what about the topic.
Oh, I could just see, you must be the happiest person in a research library, just going, oh, I got one.
Yeah. Oh,
off
my
and
God.
running. Off
it's
and
heaven
running.
for me.
There you go.
It's heaven. But so was this past hour. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very
I had
much.
so
What a
much fun
joy.
tonight.